In graffiti, nighttime is the right time, and the benefits of tagging on the street when nobody's outside and visibility is low don't need to be explained. But as a 13-year-old kid in 1997, my opportunities to go out there and hit the streets at nighttime were limited to none. The same was the case for my homeboy E, who was my best friend at that time and my graffiti mentor. And despite the fact that it was gonna be very difficult for us to go out there and hit the streets at nighttime at that age, we still understood the importance of doing so. And by the spring of 1997, we understood that this was so important that we had to make it happen at any cost. And this is what we did. During this time, both the homeboy E and myself were 8th graders at Everett and were active bus hoppers. And there was only a couple of opportunities for us that popped up to even hit the streets, and it was always during the day. And while we were out there just trying to build up our reputations, build up our recognition, and hone our skills, E was also doing a lot of networking. And while he was networking, he ran into somebody that was older than us, that was a more established rider from the crew TFC that lived in the Mission District. Through this person that E met, E joined TFC himself and probably was the youngest member of that crew at that time. And at some point in getting to know this dude, E mentioned me and let him know that I was the main guy he wrote with. And after hearing about me, this dude invited me to come out with him and E to go bomb, but there was only one problem. And that was, the only time we could go bomb with this fool was at night. This was a very big problem for us because we wanted to kick it with this dude, bomb with this dude, be down with them, but getting out of the house at that age, at nighttime, was gonna be damn near impossible. On my end, at that time, I was living with my mom and living with my sister in a very small house, maybe not even 400 square feet. My mom was a really light sleeper, so if I was trying to pass by where she slept, I was gonna wake her up and she was gonna ask me, "What the hell are you doing going outside?" Worse, she woke up very early in the morning, and on Sunday morning, she had to be at work at 6 a.m. And before leaving for work, she would come in, say goodbye to me, give me a hug, give me a kiss, and tell me she loved me. But if I wasn't there at 5:30 in the morning when she was leaving, she was tripping, and it was gonna be ugly for me. On the homeboy E's end, it was gonna be the same experience, if not worse. E was raised by two old school parents from Mexico, and he knew that if they caught him walking out of the front door at 1 o'clock in the morning, he was getting a whooping. Right on the spot, he might be getting a whooping anytime they felt like whooping him after that. And given that this dude from TFC wanted to link with us on a Saturday night, it was gonna be even more so difficult for the homeboy E to sneak out. And that's because usually on Saturdays, his dad would bring over like 4 or 5 of his boys. They get locked in the back room of E's house and they get wasted. And these fools would be in that back room until like 1 or 2 in the morning, laughing hella, listening to hella banda, listening to hella rancheras, and just getting super faded. However, despite the fact that E's dad was gonna be there with all of his compas drunk as hell, we still understood something very early in the planning of this mission. And that was, instead of us trying to sneak out individually and meet up somewhere, it was better if I stayed at E's house and we snuck out together. And that's because at E's house, he had a decent sized backyard and he owned a tent. And we could pitch that thing in the backyard, tell his parents that we're just gonna camp out there for the night, and probably nobody was gonna bug us. And in the lead up to this mission, we tested that out and we saw if anybody was gonna bother us, and ultimately, nobody did. So while we knew that we could stay in that backyard and not get bothered, we now needed to find a way to get out of the backyard. And not that long after this mission was suggested to us, the homeboy E hit me up and told me he might have a plan. In kind of a paranoid touch, he told me he wasn't gonna tell me over the phone, but he'd tell me when we met up. I stayed at this fool's house pretty much every weekend at that point, so the next time I was over there, he took me out into the backyard and he told me to look over his fence. E's neighbor had a passageway running under their house that started at Richland and was guarded by a metal gate and ended in their backyard. At the exit of this passageway under the house was a wooden door with a big window pane in the middle of it. And I asked E if that door was locked, and unfortunately, he said it was. But despite this door being locked, he still looked at it as our best way to get out. And he told me that we could start stripping away the caulk that sealed that window in, that held it in place, and when it was gone, we could just lift that window out, unlock the door, and walk through that front gate. And as a side note, I can tell you guys, this isn't good neighborly behavior. It's a pretty whack thing to do. We had nothing against this neighbor. They'd never done anything to us, but we were dedicated to graff and we were dedicated to getting out of the house and bombing at nighttime. And this seemed to be the only way to do so this is what we did. And from that day onward, we started stripping away the sealant on that window. And this fool E would just post up waiting for his neighbor to leave. He'd be looking out for their car, and as soon as that fool was gone, he'd jump over the fence into that backyard and start stripping away. I would do the same when I was over there, and because I was a smaller dude and it was easier for me to get over that fence, when I'd be over at this fool's house, I'd ask him to look out for me, and I'd jump over the fence and strip that window away too. We worked on this for weeks, and anytime we jumped over that fence or had to jump back over the fence when we were done, we risked getting caught. But one day in early May, this fool hit me up and let me know that he could take that window fully out, and the mission was a go. But despite now having a means of exit, we still had a bunch of stuff we needed to get together. Our primary concern was getting cans. I don't necessarily remember how we got our cans, but this fool E could hit up his parents and ask them to buy him some cans to do a mural in his backyard, and this might have been the way. But I remember having a couple myself, and there was really only one way to get them in those days, so I'm guessing that's how I got them. I do remember, however, going out to Daly City and buying fat caps and testing them out, working them out a lot in the weeks leading up to this night, because I really wanted to be able to pull off a flare on one of my letters. At that time, I was writing just, and what I was trying to do was perfect a flare on the circular part of my T. And while this fool E was stripping out that window, I was working on can control, I was working on my flares, and I was working on my letters. And once that window was stripped out, we knew that we could finally proceed as planned, but we still needed one other thing to line up. And we needed a Saturday night where E's dad's friends weren't gonna be coming over getting faded as hell listening to Banda. And once we knew that we had a Saturday like this lined up, we let the homeboy from TFC know everything was a go. But even with this plan being a go and us being ready to do it, we're still gonna have to get out of the house and make it from Richland all the way to 16th and Church intact and unharmed. In 1997, trying to make it from Richland all the way out to 16th and Church on foot can be very dangerous even in the daytime. And that's because the Mission's gang conflict in the late 90s was particularly intense. We were planning on meeting up with this fool out on 16th and Church at 1 o'clock in the morning, and really the only people we anticipated being out there at that time were gang members or cops. And we knew that if the people out there in the mix saw us, bare minimum, they were gonna run up on us and bang on us and ask us where we were from. And if they didn't like the answers or just simply didn't like us, they were gonna do something to us. But they might do something to us even before banging on us. And obviously when it comes to running into the cops, that's self-explanatory. We were out there, we were kids, we had cans on us, and we weren't supposed to be outside. But when it came to the police, there was something that worked in our favor. At that time, I was maybe 5'1" and weighed maybe 110 pounds. But this fool E was like 6 foot tall and weighed maybe 220 or 230. So if the cops passed us on the street, they wouldn't necessarily think that's two kids on the street. They might end up thinking that's a dude out there with his son. And for both of us, it was very important to be seen in this neighborhood and be running in this neighborhood. And this neighborhood was central to our existence as writers. And that's due to all the quality graff that you would see all throughout the Mission every single day. And because we spent a gang of time there, we went to school there, we wanted our tags to be up there alongside everybody else. But to be honest with you guys, we weren't even really thinking about all this. All we cared about was getting out of the house on time and meeting up with the homeboy from TFC on 16th and Church. And when this Saturday came, we set up the tent in E's backyard at like 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock at night. We already said our goodbyes to everybody at that point. We brought sleeping bags, we brought a radio, we brought some snacks, and we just went out there to kick it. But to be honest with you guys, we didn't do a lot of kicking back. What we did was recon. And through the mesh door of that tent, we waited for every single light in this fool's house to turn off. This happened around 11 o'clock at night, but we still hung around and waited to see if anybody else was gonna wake up unexpectedly. So after like 40 minutes of feeling a lot of paranoia and just having a lot of anticipation, waiting for this thing to get going, we finally felt like we could roll out. As was usually the case, I was the first one over that fence, but when it came to that glass window pane, I wasn't messing with it. About 8 months prior, I almost lost my life when a window exploded on my face. And I still had a lot of anxiety around glass, and anything glass related, I wasn't messing with. So I stood there while this fool took that glass pane out of the door and just put it to the side. As quietly as we could, we unlocked the back door and shut it very softly behind us. And we tiptoed through the corridor underneath E's neighbor's house and approached that metal gate. We were gonna need to get back through this gate on the way back. So as we were leaving this passageway, E mostly closed that gate, but he put a little rock in there to keep it propped open. And with that gate closed, we were happy because the first part of this plan was complete. But even if we were happy, we were still really paranoid. And we felt like we needed to get really far away before we could even celebrate being outside. Before we could even just bomb anything, we needed to be far away from where we lived. And this was nonsensical. We knew that nobody that we knew was gonna be outside. There was no way in hell that my mom was gonna be on the street at 12:30 at night on mission, coming out of a bar, listening to Banda. It wasn't gonna happen, and it wasn't gonna happen with E's parents because we saw them go to sleep. But none of this mattered. We expected to get busted at any moment. And finally, when we crossed Army Street onto Guerrero, we finally accepted that we were outside and we were free, and we decided to hit up for the first time. But even though nobody was out on the street and we could have been in this spot for as long as we wanted, we only decided to hit up once each and keep it moving. And after another 25 or 30 minutes of walking, we finally made it over to 16th and Church without any problems, didn't run into anybody, and we met up with this fool from TFC. As I said earlier, this guy was older than us, and I have to figure he was anywhere from 15 to 17. He seemed very comfortable being out on the street at that time of night, but let us know he could only bomb for a couple of hours before he had to go home. Unfortunately, I don't remember what this fool wrote, but I can tell you, as we were heading off to our first spot, he told us what he wrote, and I saw him up multiple times just in a couple of blocks. This includes a piece that he busted that I saw in one of my favorite spots in the whole city. And during my time as a writer, the open air tunnel that the J Church runs through, leading through Dolores Park out onto 22nd and Church, was absolutely crushed. And to me, it seemed very fitting that one of my favorite places in the city to see Graff is where this mission was gonna start. And as we were walking through this tunnel to start this night of bombing, we got lucky. In retrospect, we got really lucky when it came to this mission. And the first bit of luck that we received was in walking up to a freshly buffed wall in this tunnel. This dude from TFC had his own paint, and without warning, he started crushing that wall. E hit up next, and he passed me the can he was using, and I hit up afterwards, and within a couple of seconds, that wall was bombed. But despite the fact that nobody was out there wasn't a single soul that wasn't us on that street, we didn't feel all that comfortable lingering around in this spot. And as soon as I was done tagging, we dipped. And as we walked down 20th Street to the next place we were going, we were just making small talk. I was asking this dude questions about how long he's been in the mix and who he knew, and we just kind of proceeded like this. But at the corner of 20th and Valencia, something caught my eye. And what I saw was a freshly painted, freshly buffed metal mailbox that was just glittering in the light of a street lamp. And as soon as it caught my eye, I let him know, hey, give me a second, I want to get up. On that smooth metal surface, I started hitting up Just in yellow Krylon paint. And when I did the flare on that tee for Just, the bottom of that faded out part of that tee took up the whole bottom corner of this mailbox. I was real happy with how this tag came out, and I took a couple seconds to admire it and just look at it. And when I looked over at the homeboy from TFC, I realized he had been watching me the whole time. And when we looked at each other, he just kind of smiled and he nodded his head, and he let me know he thought it was dope. In the weeks leading up to this moment, I've been really preoccupied with getting the flare on that tee right. And with this fool showing me love, letting me know that it was dope in a cool and subtle manner, I felt like a major mission had been accomplished. And after this moment passed on 20th and Valencia, we all realized something else too. And it really started to sink in for me and E especially that nobody was on the streets. Nobody saw what we were doing. Nobody even knew we were doing it, and we could do whatever we wanted. And prior to this moment, I had never felt this sense of overwhelming freedom, this sense of I could do whatever the hell I want in whatever way I want ever in my life. And to be real with you guys, I haven't really felt it all that many times since. And it's really hard to describe what you feel when you understand this is me, being me, doing what I'm supposed to do, and nobody can stop it. Mind you, plenty of people could have stopped it, especially the police. And where I busted that T-flare on 20th and Valencia was only a couple of blocks from a cop station. But all throughout this night, we never saw a single cop, never saw a single cop car, and never even really heard any sirens. And the mission on that night had an uncharacteristic quiet that I wasn't used to. On any given night on Mission Street, you hear people yelling, you hear drunk people getting into arguments, and you just see people coming and going, leaving restaurants, leaving bars, just going about their lives. But despite the fact that some of these businesses were still open, there was just nobody out there, and we were very lucky in this regard too. And as soon as we fully internalized that we were doing this, nobody was gonna stop us, nobody was even out here to stop us, this mission turned into a free-for-all. And block by block from Valencia, we would stop at each corner, look around, one of us would look out, and the other people who weren't looking out would hit up. We did hand styles all night, and we never really lingered on any corner for more than a couple of seconds. And as we destroyed corner after corner, block after block, our confidence only grew. And by the time we headed down to Bryant, we had hit so many corners, hit up so many hand styles, we started deciding what to do next. There was a muni yard not that far from there, so we decided maybe it was worth checking out. But I remember going over there, seeing a lot of activity, seeing people in the yard, seeing bus drivers just kind of milling all around, and it didn't seem worth it to hang around. We only had a limited amount of time to kick it with this dude, and he wouldn't be back at his place on 16th and Church by 3. So if we stood around and just waited for an opportunity, waited for a couple of minutes to get in there and crush buses, we might waste all the time that we had with this fool just waiting. But there was somewhere else across the neighborhood that we also wanted to check out, called the DuBose Tunnel. And if you found some of the best riders in Graff's history in that J Church open air tunnel, it was even more so in the DuBose Tunnel. And it was beneficial for us to go over there because this dude lived right over by there, and we're gonna have to be back over there anyway, so it was worth checking out. So as we proceeded back towards where this fool lived, we crushed corners along the way. And this dude kept seeing me do that T-flare, and anytime he saw it, he always seemed to have that same smile on his face. It just made me happy. But even if this fool from TFC didn't like my tags, didn't like the flare on my T, or just plain didn't like me, I wouldn't have gave a crap. And that's because I was in my element, not just as a rider, but seemingly as a human being. And being out here with the blank canvas of the streets, having enough paint to hit up as much as I wanted, having people that were looking out for me and letting me know it was cool, and us going about this thing in this collective way, it felt like a trip to Disneyland instead of a trip to the mission. And up until that point in my life, I never laid down as many tags at one time as I did in the Mission District on that night. And after I would lay down a tag, I was thinking about the people that I knew that lived over there that would see these tags and maybe wonder, how the hell did this fool Connor get all the way over here from Cortland? And I was riding on such a high wave that by the time we got to that DuBose Tunnel and found that we couldn't get in it, it didn't even really matter. We had crushed the streets so much, we felt like we had achieved so much in this graffiti journey that the fact that we couldn't sneak into a tunnel didn't mean anything. And after leaving the DuBose Tunnel behind, we just decided it was pretty late, it was almost 3 o'clock anyway, we were just gonna walk this fool back to 16th and Church and call it a night. And as we were dropping this fool off, he was super happy and he was very thankful that we came out and kicked it with him, and we were equally thankful that he kicked it with us. And this fool showed me love in particular. He shook my hand, he told me it was really nice to meet me, and he looked forward to bombing with me again. And while this was really cool, there was something else that was even cooler that was happening in the background that I didn't know about. And in addition to this just being a mission to go out there and crush the streets in the mission, this was also a tryout for me to join the crew TFC. He had been telling this fool that I was down, I was committed, and I was ready for whatever. And this guy wanted to see what my skills were like before letting me in the crew. He also wanted to see if I had the heart to go out there and bomb at the most opportune time in maybe not the most opportune environment. And because I was down, I wasn't scared to be out in the streets at that time, and he thought my style was dope, that was good enough for him, and I was down with TFC. But as we were saying goodbye to this dude, I didn't know that any of this was the case. And I was just happy to be out there bombing at nighttime with some cool people. And because me and the Homeboy E had so much joy, we were so happy with everything about this night going well, we didn't even tag on the walk home. And we felt like that part of the night was over. We did what we needed to do. We did way more than we thought we were gonna be able to do, and we were happy with how things stood. Not only that, we still needed to infiltrate back into E's house, hop over that fence, and jump in the tent and act like nothing happened. And ultimately, when we got back to E's neighbor's house, that little rock that we put in the gate was still there. And within a couple of seconds, I was jumping over that fence, Eve was putting that window back into place, and we were in that tent, and it was mission accomplished. It was like 4 something in the morning, and personally, I was so amped up, I was so juiced up that it was hard to get to sleep. I think it was something similar for E, but I noticed something else about him as well. And on his face, he looked really proud. And personally, I gotta figure when E first thought about doing stuff like this, sneaking out of the house, going on nighttime missions, he didn't necessarily envision me being there. And when it came to the crew of people that I started riding with, I was like the run of the litter. Everybody that I started tagging with had been in the mix longer than me. They were more talented and seemingly more committed. But some of these guys who seemed more committed at the start of 8th grade, by the end of 8th grade, had already fallen off. And I don't know why they fell off, but they did. And by the end of 8th grade, E, myself, and maybe 1 or 2 other people were still doing it. And being the person who had the least amount of knowledge about graff, being this run of the litter, and frankly, being the wackest dude out of the crew made me feel like I had something to prove. And I was incredibly committed to getting up and getting better, and I tagged every single day and I practiced every single day for hours in this pursuit. So when all this entered our lives, I was probably the last person that he ever expected to go on a mission like this. But now here we were, and everything was a resounding success, and I just saw a lot of pride on his face. And we committed ourselves to going out on another mission like this as soon as we could. But unfortunately, as I talked about in a recent video, we fell out before we ever could. And I ended up tagging at nighttime a bunch of times after this. And for the next year plus, almost every time I'd be out in Berkeley, I'd be out at nighttime catching tags. However, there's a major difference, and that was the person I'd be out there in the streets with wasn't a rider. So this meant these weren't really bombing missions. I wasn't focused on bombing, I was just catching tags. And there'd be other missions along the way, and as soon as I met the Homeboy K and the Homeboy W at Wallenberg, we went on missions all the time. But this nighttime mission in the mission, with everything it came with everything that went down and everything it meant to us, will always be my favorite. And to be honest, I don't ever really expect to have a better graffiti related memory than this one. But in doing these videos and being very much connected at this point to this thing I love called graffiti, I hope to experience something very soon.